First speaker for the night is Graeme. Graeme is a multi-disciplinary game developer and longtime jam enthusiast. He builds playful VR experiences as the gameplay director for Owlchemy Labs, and as an independent developer, he's assembled dozens of small titles in varying genres and styles. He loves using games as a way to create and explore new worlds. So give it up for Graeme. I'm going to click this, and this is going to do this. And this will come over here, and then I'll make this full screen, and maybe it'll stay full screen this time. And then I do that. Oh, magic. And then this. Yeah.
Radical. Oh, appreciate that.
Yep. And then, yeah. This mic is for the recording, and this mic is for everybody here. Try to voice into both of those, but I don't know if I did a good job of that. Who knows?
Awesome. Okay. Yeah. Hey, everybody. Should I make this taller, maybe? That's gonna make a horrible noise. I'll just talk. You can. I'm good. You can hear. Okay. So yeah. Hi. My name is Graeme. I'm a programmer, artist, kind of a jack of all trades. I do a bunch of like different things in the game dev space. And as June said, I've done a bunch of game jams, and sort of the thing that I like doing in jams is trying to build a variety of stuff, trying out new mechanics, putting my own spin on stuff. And another thing that I do, which I'm really passionate about, is digital illustration, kind of separate from games. It's another area where I like working quickly on things and just trying to like iterate and express a variety of ideas. So naturally, something that I think about a lot is how to bridge those two worlds and kind of use things that I've learned in one to benefit the other. So today I'm going to talk about some game design strategies that are sort of specific to my own experience, combining those two things, but I hope the talk can encourage you to sort of pull on your own unique experience, whatever that is, from outside of game dev to help inform your game dev work. So games are complicated, and a natural thing that a lot of us do when describing them is to kind of describe them in terms of other games. So like it's like X but with a little bit of Y, or it's the combat of this with the story of that. And that's cool, that works. It's like a very functional language. But there's a lot of other sort of less literal ways to quantify and describe games and their mechanics. And what I'm going to do is kind of basically pitch you a weird alternative way of describing that stuff that's based on abstract visuals. We're going to translate game design into a language that's easier for us to manipulate based on intuition and feeling, which is the language of shapes. So the visual world has like a billion different rules about how to sort of put things together, how to deal with shapes and compose effective images just in a purely visual sense. And even if you haven't like read up on this stuff, you've probably heard of things like the rule of thirds or just like the idea of composition in general. That stuff's all great and useful, but I'm not trying to make you a graphic designer. That's not what this is about. I think that humans are just inherently good at looking at things and kind of attempting to make sense of them, especially when they're simple and abstract. So really what this is just trying to like harness some of those gut instincts and do something with it. So let's take a look at an example. Chess, right? We all know chess. How can you express the mechanics of chess as a shape? Maybe the first thing that comes to mind when you think about like chess shapes is this, right? But that's not really what I'm talking about. Like this is what chess looks like, but what does it feel like, the mechanics of chess? It's focused, it's strategic. You really only have like one central choice or like thing to do, like where are you moving your next piece, right? But it's complicated. It's a heavy choice with a lot of possibilities. It feels solid, it's like centered and clear, and it's kind of elegant. To me, that feels like it could be expressed as like just a straightforward circle, right? It's singular, clear, focused, it's big. You might interpret it differently, and that's fine, but let's like work with a circle as a way of expressing that and then break it down a bit more. So what actually makes chess interesting, right? You choose which piece to move. So you have this one choice, and the different pieces within that choice give you different options. So we kind of have like these different elements inside one larger element. They differ in complexity. And then maybe if you like stare at this for a second, you can kind of start to like internalize some intuition for how this abstract shape like equates to the mechanics of chess in some way. It's not like a scientific diagram, but you can kind of feel it, right? We're using intuition to build up a shape, but we've made some kind of like reasonable connections to get there, which is where it starts to get juicy, because now that we have a abstract shape, we can start to like manipulate it and think about what's this game, right? We're still dealing with like a large singular central choice, but within it our choices are like more even. They're rigid and structured, and they're sequential, repetitious, right? Is that important? What does that mean? You might have like different ideas about this. What I think this is kind of doing is tricking our brains into being able to like describe things without getting lost in the specifics, right? So when we did that, what actually happened back in the real world? A straightforward interpretation might be like we changed how the pieces work, right? Maybe now there's 4 types of similar pieces on the board. They all have similar abilities. They're more like repetitious. So maybe your choice is more about like which piece are you moving rather than what each one does. Maybe we're looking at something closer to checkers now. Sure, that's a possible interpretation. But you can interpret it other ways too. Like how do the options available during chess end up feeling more organized and even? That's like a question that we can answer. And now we're talking about changes to the design based on intuition, which is kind of interesting. So what's this game all about? Like what does it mean when some of the elements are sticking out of other ones? Nothing's touching the middle one. Does that matter? What does that mean? How do we design a mechanic to break the boundary of another one? Again, we're all going to have different intuitions about that, but now we're in a state where we can like quickly pivot around our brainstorming session just by moving circles around. So yeah, you might be thinking like, okay, this guy's lost it. He's just ranting about circles, and I have and I am. But I'm trying to encourage you to just make stuff up as well, right? Find ways to activate your own intuition and design with a looser mindset. So that's like something that I think jams are really good at. We're just trying to access a place where feel is the thing that's in charge, right? We're reducing design to only the playful part and doing the hard stuff later once the idea has already clicked on like an intuitive level. So can we actually use this technique to intentionally improve a design instead of just like randomly mutating chess? Let's say we're making an RPG, right? It's kind of like centered on this battle system, and maybe we've got like crafting and dialogue trees and all this other stuff that are sort of peripheral to that, but it reinforces this central core. And we want it to feel big and mechanically expansive, like there's a lot going on, lots of choices, lots of information. We have a really strong central core. There's subsystems and details kind of supporting this macro shape and like bubbling up. And if we really try to make it big, something starts to happen, right? We lose perspective. By trying to make the core piece more and more massive, we're starting to miss out on parts of it. And it kind of just looks like nothing, right? Scope creep is starting to compromise the original goal of making a massive system. So let's flip over to thinking of it as a composition of shapes, right? How can we make the central element feel big, regardless of what it actually is? You might have your own ideas about how to do that. Here's mine. Now we can see even less of the actual core element, but we've changed the composition with like an intentional goal of making it feel big, right? We just put a new small element in there for the purpose of contrasting the size of the big one. It's not connected, it's just floating off to the side there to give the feeling of weight. And because of that, we can kind of understand how massive the thing on the left is, even though we're only seeing part of it. And we have no idea what the little circle represents or what that's going to be, but we have a clear understanding of why it's there, which is what's important at this point. So if we step back again and think about what it means for our game, well, maybe another factor that's making this combat circle on the left feel huge is the fact that part of it's being cropped out, right? Do we actually need to implement the whole thing, or should our design goal for that part of the game be to like seek out a part of that mechanic that can be implemented on its own to imply the existence of the rest of it? That's something that we can like have as a mission going into our design process for the game. That could be interesting. So having specific goals like that helps to constrain how to actually build this stuff and what your mechanics actually need to be like. And remember, the purpose of the smaller element is just to provide contrast with the big one. So like in an RPG, maybe this is when our heroes are done fighting monsters for the day, they like gather around the campfire and we choose what they have for dinner, right? It's got nothing to do with fighting, and it's probably very different. Like there's no reflex or threat involved, but it's different on purpose to sit outside the rest. It might make combat seem more grand just by comparison, right? The point is that we're thinking about what the shapes were doing, and we were able to make intentional decisions about what the game needs to do as a result. So now when we're building those mechanics for real, we have like a rubric to evaluate them. We can ask questions like, do the things we're adding create contrast, or are they just continuing to like inflate a giant circle without adding any perspective? That's like a red flag we can look for, right? We've kind of created a map of the underlying motivation of all these elements so that we don't get lost when we're building them. Okay, so that's pretty abstract. Is it really worth doing? Does it actually save you time? Maybe. I think it can. It's kind of something only you can answer. In my opinion, the design process should just be as playful as possible, like simplify things, make a mess, find ways to benefit from other knowledge that you have like this. I'm not saying your game has to be simple or obvious, but I think the intention behind each element in a game should be crystal clear. If you want to just make something up out of nowhere, like we often do for a jam, I think an interesting way to try to do that is to try to just make up a process and then be pretty structured with how you work through that process instead of just trying to like manifest an end result all at once. If the process incorporates something personal to you, you'll end up having like a connection to the results, even if they end up different than what you intended at the beginning. So these are the kind of questions we've been dealing with. Like you can ask these, if you can read them, any way that you want. I think shapes are like a fun way to do that, but there's an infinite number of others. In a jam where you're only going to have time to commit to one core idea, it's especially important for all elements of your game to exist for a purpose. So put them in context with each other, examine the whole composition, and feel it out. Like make sure you have answers to this stuff, because if your reasoning isn't clear in an abstract form, it's not going to get any better when you go to implement all the details, right? So that's my weird pitch. Thanks for hearing me out. And as a little bonus, here's some free ideas for games in case you get stuck thinking of something. You can make that. That one might be fun. I'm really interested to see how that plays. Squares, don't get me started. Haven't even. That one's kind of fun. Seems a little dangerous. I don't know. This one's my favorite. Someone should make that. I want to play that. It's very like calming somehow. Yeah, so that's it. Thank you. Good luck. Lots of jamming.